Hey there guys, this is Obsidian Chill. I've got another video from the test server. As you can tell by the title, this one is in regards to my thoughts and opinions on the phase dodge change. Now, if you haven't looked at the forums recently, they released the patch notes for update 34, and they're changing how phase dodge works. Essentially, they're doing the same thing as they did with Rage. They're increasing the cooldown. Where in the past they've done other changes, it looks like how they're adjusting powers now is by cooldown. So before on live server it's about maybe a second cooldown. On test server now the duration lasts for 4 seconds and then the cooldown is 12 seconds. So that's obviously a big change, and obviously that has a lot of implications for DC. Because phase dodge, like I wouldn't say phase dodge is a widely used power, but it's a very handy power. Now, I'll get into my thoughts and opinions on the issue. Like what I can kind of gather is that the devs didn't like phase dodge being used for something that they didn't intend, because that's the only thing that the change really iterates. Like you have like phase dodge, if you don't know, is basically it's similar to block. So when you're in phase dodge vibrating, you get 5,000 defense, 5,000 toughness, and 1,000 control resistance. So besides the 1,000 control resistance, it's pretty much the same as block, except that you don't have the ability to be block broken because phase dodge deflects block breakers. So it's essentially a defensive power, but no one really, you don't use it for that way. Like you don't go into raids and see tanks sitting in phase dodge tanking the like the tyrant, or sitting in phase dodge while they're tanking prime or anything like that. Like no one ever used it as a defensive power except in PvP. In PvP, it made sense there because obviously you have the 5,000 toughness to mitigate. It's essentially you're blocking and you can mitigate incoming damage, except that you can't be countered. So in PvP, people used it as a defensive power. But that's not even by the majority. Like it takes so much power in PvP, which is already at a premium. It was under very select circumstances that you could use it, and you certainly couldn't spam it. It's not like, and even I don't even know on the PS3 if people use phase dodge at all. Like on the PC, like yeah, the odd people use it. It's not like godly. Like it may be annoying, but like it's not like that's gonna win them the match because they sat in phase dodge the whole time. Because while you're in phase dodge, you can't do anything. You can't hit powers. You can't heal. You can't do anything. It's basically just for that, momentary, survivability power. But everyone used it as a clipping power because it's a support power, and in the clipping order, everything, all support powers clip everything else. So you can clip trinkets, powers, anything with a support power, which is basically like a shield or like a weapon buff. Now there's I'm not QQing over the change. Like I know phase dodge in its truest sense wasn't balanced. Like I didn't have an issue with that. But the change that they did to phase dodge, it's in honesty, it's pointless. Like all they're doing is to, like, no one's gonna use that power. Like I guess you could still use it in PvP because there's not too many times, like every 12 seconds, that you'd have to sit in phase dodge. So I'm sure some people, like if they used it in PvP, it'll probably still stay on their loadout. But for everything else, like for all PvE content, raids, clipping, everything, it's useless. And that's what the majority of the community used it for. And it's not about abuse. It's about using all the tools that you have to your ability, to reach your best potential. Now, I'll go into what I think they should have changed it to. Like, yes, like if you're a flight or acrobat user, I have no issues with you saying like, hey, we want to use phase dodge too. Like it's unfair that only you guys can use it. I don't have a problem with that. Like they could have easily made phase dodge an iconic power, and then they wouldn't have had any issue. Even if they left phase dodge the exact same, like being an instant clip, no cooldown, if they would have put that in the iconic power tree available to everyone as a power point instead of a skill point like it was in the super speed tree, because yes, it's a very powerful power for a skill point. But same back in the day, so was Vacuum Bubble. Like you have a skill point as a supercharge, where most DPS power sets had crappy supercharges. Like if you were an Ice DPS back then, you didn't use any Ice DPS supercharges. You used Vacuum Bubble if you were Flight, because its Vacuum Bubble was a very powerful supercharge back then, and by comparison. So there's tons of tons of cases where you have powerful powers as skill points in the various trees. Like a Perfect Poise was nerfed, but when Perfect Poise was first introduced in the Acrobat tree, Perfect Poise was incredibly powerful as a supercharge only available to Acrobat users. Yeah, so it's trade-offs. Like I realize I don't have an issue with everyone wanting to use phase dodge. Like I would encourage that. Like everyone should have the access to that power, so it could be made an iconic power. Even like the DC mantra of like iconic powers being like a gag glove, phase clown box, like all the powers that you see like the Joker and like all those heroes and villains use. Like that's like the DC mantra. But phase dodge could easily fall into that category just with like the Flash and all the variations of the Flash using phase dodge ability, so that could easily find its way into an iconic power, and it wouldn't be disregarded. But instead, they make this change and basically make it useless. The other thing they could have done is strip the defensive component from it. So if you take phase dodge, if they remove the 5,000 block and the 5,000 toughness, because no one used it as a defensive power, like this was a clipping tool. So if they take away the perks of that being a defensive power but leaving everything else, I don't think it would have been an issue. That would have solved it for PvP, because if you spam it in PvP, like all it would do then it would deflect block breakers, but you wouldn't have any damage mitigation. So no one's going to do that because they're still going to take full damage. So it fixes that. So that change fixes it, solves phase dodge for that aspect, and then making it an iconic power fixes everything else. But instead, they pretty much destroy the power, and then I've seen it on the forums all week. Like they take away phase dodge, and with these changes, and everyone's like, "Oh, this is going to be so balanced. This is going to be perfectly balanced for the game. This is a huge step." Like you've got that friggin' tool Ultra Elite from the Community Council. Like I don't know what the hell he made it on the DCU Community Council, because he doesn't represent jack shit. But if you don't know him, then you're not gonna understand. But anyways, yeah, like the changes to phase dodge create more imbalances than ever before. Like basically, phase dodge can make any power set, like sorcery, earth, ice, nature before the revamp, mental. You could use phase dodge in your rotation, just like I have in all my videos. Like the videos on my channel, you don't see me like only using, like I can't remember the last time I did like a hard light DPS video. Like I have a few gadgets videos up there just because gadgets is my favorite power set. But yeah, like you don't see me always sitting in the top 4 of the power sets. What I have fun doing is taking a power set everyone thinks is bad, and making it viable against everyone else. And you could do that with phase dodge. Like it's like, yeah, there's drawbacks. Phase dodge used a ton of power, so it's not, and we had to use 3 controllers to maximize it. So like there are drawbacks. It's not like you can just pick up phase dodge and all of a sudden be a god. But it gave you opportunities that you didn't already have in your power set. Like a lot of power sets are great, or can be great. Like mental is a good example of this, because mental has great damaging powers. The issue is that all these powers have like pretty long animations, so you're losing out on so much potential having to sit in those animations the whole time. And like, yeah, you could say, well, you could clip with a consumable, but a consumable has a 4-second cooldown, and in the time it takes, like you've seen my mental rotation videos, like in that 4 seconds I've already done almost 2 full rotations of with if I was using phase dodge. And same thing with like using phase dodge and grenade, sneaking in a grenade, phase dodge grenade. So basically you get that double grenade using any powers. So it makes any power set, like look at my Earth DPS rotation and video. Like you wouldn't think an Earth DPS could compete against like a hard light or gadgets. Like that's out of the question. But with phase dodge they could. And that's where the balance comes from. Like the top 4 power sets, like I know there's videos out there with the gadgets DPS using phase dodge, but they don't need it. Like that's a bit excessive, and they might be trying something neat. But for the highest potential loadouts for gadgets, the highest potential DPS for hard light. Celestial you could argue, but Celestial you don't need it. And then for Rage, the top 4 damage power sets, you don't need phase dodge to be successful. There's rotations that don't use phase dodge and are still awesome. But they're like sorcery, yeah, you can use it. Fire, there's some rotations that you can. Earth there's not. Ice there's really not. But it's not the fault of the power set. It's just like the fault that they don't have. They're missing that one clipping tool to bring them to the next level, and that's what phase dodge brought them. Yes, it was unbalanced from the fact that you had to be super speed to use that power, and that's what the issue was. Like obviously, there's a complete and a good argument for the fact that phase dodge is overpowered because A, it's a skill point, and B, it's only available to super speed. But that's it. That's their only argument. And that argument is easily overcome by the fact that, okay, I counter your argument by saying let's make an iconic power available to everyone and strip the and then that's it. Even that, if they make an iconic power, that means it's a power point, so you have a limited number of those. So that means you only have 14 to allocate for the rest of your powers because one's got to be phase dodge. So then you got to be selective about that. And then B, it makes it available to everyone. That's it there. And if people want to complain about its defensive stats, then like I said, just strip the 5,000 toughness, 5,000 defense from it, and make it just deflect block breakers. So then, like, the thing is, it's some tanks used it more than DPS, but the tanks used it to cut their animations like fire. Like, you don't have to tank with phase dodge, but some people did it just because the power is available, and it made it a bit easier on the healers because then between powers, they were always blocking. Like, so many people, like, and so many bad players, and they say they use it as a crutch. Like, if you read a post on the forums or someone saying that phase dodge was a crutch, they have no idea what's going on, and they're just being stupid and just like falling into the bandwagon of QQing and I've seen comments like I love your tears. It's like I'm not upset. Like I'm upset that there's no balance anymore. Now you have the top 4 power sets and everyone else. Like nature mental is still good, but they don't have that potential anymore. Like yes, you can do nature rotations without phase dodge, just like you can with mental. So it's not like a total loss, but if you take my argument is if you take an equally skilled hard light DPS or gadgets versus an equally skilled nature DPS, that hard light or gadgets is going to beat that nature 9 times out of 10. And I know some people say that, well, I've never lost to a hard light or a nature or whatever. I've never lost to the top 4 power sets as nature. Like I'm a beast. That's fine, but I'm not sure. Like I can't gauge your level of competition. Like where am I going with this? Sorry, this is just like a live commentary. I don't have any notes. But yeah, it's you're losing out on potential with your power set without a clipping tool like phase dodge. And people say that unbalances the game, and it's more balanced without phase dodge. Like, if you trust the developers to go through and revamp all your power sets again, like nature got close, but if you take Vocarious Plants out of the equation, I don't think nature got close. And the changes to harvest are what's making nature powerful right now, and having it refresh dots on single target. If you take that away and having to refresh your dots, then nature falls way, way behind. Because with phase dodge, you could spread all your dots so quickly it didn't matter. But now, since you can do that in Wolf and then switch out and then harvest will refresh on single target, that's what makes nature still competitive against those other power sets. If you take that ability away like it wasn't before, nature is way farther behind, just like mental. Because then you have to have all those long animations of like Vine Lash and Briar and Harvest. You have to redo all those animations to refresh your dots. But they fixed that with Harvest. That's why nature's still okay. Mental will fall a bit behind because it's not really it'll still do great, but once again it's about potential. Like in most of my posts on the forums, if you're following them, I'm talking about potential, and that's what it is. Like without phase dodge, the majority of the power sets in this game lose potential, and I don't see any way that the developers are going to fix that unless they totally rehaul most of the power sets and give them some kind of clipping tool. Like for me, like I like balance, but my balance has a lot of asterisks, you could say. Like my idea of balance is different from other people's, and that's fine as long as you can defend your opinion in regards to balance. That's all that really matters to me. If some guy says like this is what balance is and I disagree, then that's fine. But yeah, it's this game needed a power like phase dodge, and now with that gone, you're gonna see a lot of people gravitate back to the top 4 power sets, because before, if you loved ice or if you loved sorcery, and you didn't want to change, you liked that power set, that was fine. But if you wanted to be able to compete against other power sets, or be effective just as like them, like if you don't care about damage, that's fine. But if you didn't care about damage, you wouldn't be using phase dodge anyway. So it's if you always have that hard light DPS or gadgets or celestial, you could stay ice or stay your favorite power set and still be effective against other people. But now without phase dodge, those power sets fall behind. And if the developers have some grandmaster plan to fix that in the future, then great, that could change. But with this change to phase dodge, it's a giant step backwards in my opinion. I think it would have been much better just to have the power available to everyone, and then everyone can use it. And I really don't think there would have been any issues. Yeah, guys, thanks for listening to, I guess you could call it a rant. I know it's not set in stone. Like, I'm gonna send some messages to some developers that I know, and try to see if they'll reconsider some of the changes, and and I'll let you know how that plays out. But yeah, we'll see. But right now, I'm disappointed. It's not gonna impact me because there's lots of other options available. But I had fun taking other power sets and making them, finding a way to make them competitive. That's what I had fun with in this game. And now that ability is taking away. Not because you could have any other power. Like phase dodge was just that clipping tool. Like if there was another clipping tool like phase dodge, that wouldn't be an issue. But right now there isn't. Yeah, I'll let you guys go. I know this has been a longer video. So cheers, guys.